Notion just released a new database view. It's been forever since this happened, and it unlocks a ton of new use cases. So, here's everything you need to know about Notion's new feed view. Plus, my favorite use cases that you should try out today. First things first. How do you actually get this new feed view for Notion? Well, it couldn't be simpler. On any pre-existing database, you can simply go in, click on the settings option right next to the blue new button. And if you have hidden it, right, if you see this, then you can click on the three dots. And then here where it says layout, you can click on layout. And now here the new feed view should pop up. And the second I switch to it, you see first that, well, it switches to the feed view. And we see a few new options. Before we look at the options, let's first take a look at the database feed. So as you can see, every single entry in my database has now turned into this scrollable feed. Kind of as if, you had Instagram or your LinkedIn feed directly in Notion. And for every single entry, as you can see, it shows the person who wrote it, right? And this is like an AI integration that I've set up to help me create a sample data. It shows you when this was created. Then you have the title, your properties, and then, and that's the really, really cool part, the content, right? This is a content preview of the entry. So let's just flip back quickly from here to my table view. Here we can see, right, if I open Monday Madness, this is some sample data, but here we have now, right, the picture and this text in my Notion page. This is amazing because previously there was not really any way, right, to display the content from your page in Notion in a neat way. You could, of course, right, switch to a gallery view, right, or a board view, and then here, in terms of your settings, right, if you turn on page preview, you get a little bit of the text, but it has no formatting. You see the second it has pictures, right, the pictures take up all the space, and you can't really look inside. Well, that is fixed with feed, right? The feed gives you a peek inside your database content and allows you to display that together with all the relevant information, and then you can go through all these entries. So, what do you need to know to make the most out of this feature? Well, first, Notion feed will simply pull in the beginning of your actual Notion content. And if it's too long, you will see this black See More button. If you click on this See More button, it will expand it still in the feed view, right? So it's not opening the page, it just like expanded to show everything. On shorter entries, right, you don't see that at all, but on the long ones, you get this option and then it, unrolls. If you actually want to open the database entry, you need to click on the title. That opens the entry just like before. And in the same way that you can influence this behavior also in other databases, if you click on Settings and then Layout, you see here Open Pages In, right? That influences whether if you click into it, it opens it in this modal or my always preferred way, right, to go with Side Peek. So if I click on that, you see now it pushes it in from the side. Next, let's talk about properties. As you can see, the second you turn on properties to show on your feed view, they stack side by side below the title. And you can do so by clicking into the settings and then into property visibility. If you haven't seen this yet, right, this is a recent Notion UI change where we now have two separate property options. We have the view options at the top that allow us to edit the actual properties shown. And then if we want to change those properties, we need to go down here. If you're not entirely sure what all this is about, I'll link my big overview for this Notion UI change and a bunch of other updates down below in the description. At the moment, we don't have any additional settings for these properties, so we cannot make them wrap, which means that if you have a very long property, for example, this sample text one, right, which is just a bunch of long text, you see that it shifts into the next line, but then it simply stops. So right now, properties behave that way, right? If it's too long for one line, they go into the next one and they will just keep stacking below. But if it's very long content, it will cut off. So right now, feed view, right, is best to display certain high-level properties and then just pull in the page content rather than, doing it with these properties. Also, if you have a property that is empty on a view, it will not show up as an option to edit, right? On other views, for example, if we go to a board view and then we say, okay, let's create a new property, right? Let's say, okay, we add, actually text that's empty on most of them, right? And I say, okay, in my settings, property visibility, I would like to see this text. On most of them, I can click on edit, right? And will open this text for me to do something. This is not an option on feed, right? If I switch back to feed and say, okay, on feed, I would like to have my text shown. Shows, of course, on this first entry, right? But on the other ones, it's not there, right? I can't click into it. I can't say, okay, let's edit this entry. So that's another thing to keep in mind. If you want to clean up the look of the feed, then you can go ahead and remove this author byline at the top. To do so, click into settings, layout, and then here we can say, please don't show the author byline. And that gives everything a little bit more breathing room, right? And makes for a cleaner look. Speaking of a clean look, by default, Notion will show you this add a comment option directly below your feed. So you can say something directly from here. And if you did that, right, it will swap to this one reply view where you can click on and then see the comment thread. These are your page level discussions, right? So if I click into an entry, you see that here the same comment shows up as well. If you want that removed, you need to go to the database entry, click on customize layout, and then if you click put it onto the general settings, right, which just means to select something other than this main level, you can see here now page discussions expanded. If I turn this off, right, and apply to all pages, you'll notice that if we go back to our feed view, we no longer have this at the bottom, right, which again, in my opinion, in most situations makes for a much cleaner look and the one that I prefer. But right now, you can't turn this off in separate places, right? Either you turn off page discussions overall, or you have them on your feed view. Now, one last quirk, and then we move on to the use cases. This last thing is about collaboration. If you use a feed view in a workspace with other people and they look at a page, you'll see that pop up in the bottom right corner, right? As you can see here, we have this little icon from Sergey who works with me and the number 2, which indicates that he has viewed this page twice, right? So you see the number of page views from other people on this feed view to help you monitor the activity. Again, right now, we cannot turn this on or off in our layout options, and we can't sort of influence what comes there. But I'm very curious to see how this develops. I would love to see if Notion in general would pull out some kind of metrics on pages into a separate property, a system property, maybe like the created by or last edited by option, just to make it a bit easier, right, to show these things in a collaborative environment. Now, if you need help implementing this, or anything else Notion related at your company, well, let's have a chat. I am building Europe's #1 Notion consultancy, and I love working with ambitious teams to help them build better systems, so that you can focus on what actually matters. You can find a link to get in touch down below in the description. So, on to use case number 1. That's the one that we used as an example the whole time, journaling. This is great for journals, right? Where you usually write unstructured information into the body of a Notion page, but then have also some structured information. With the feed view, you can simply scroll through this never-ending list, right, of your journal entries. If you add images to it, it's even nicer to look at, and it just makes it easier to revisit what you did. Now for a slightly less obvious use case. You can use feed view to highlight a specific entry. So in this case, we have a sample personal dashboard, right, in one of our demo workspaces. And as you can see, we have, of course, our projects, tasks, and docs. But here in the top right, we see our task of the day. And this is the feed view, which helps us, right, to show this really, really big. Currently, this page is locked, which makes for a nicer, cleaner view. If you have it unlocked, right, you see a bit more that this is actually the UI of the feed with the option to create a new one right from here. And the setup is super simple. All we need to do, right, is set a filter where you say, okay, this is my specific task of the day. And then whatever it is that you highlight, right, will show much, much larger than your typical task entry, right? Otherwise, if you have this small entry, here now you can put it front and center and display the most important properties just with it. Another great use case, if you use Notion to plan your meetings and set an agenda, then this is great to just scroll through your day and see what's coming up. So in this case, we have a database that hosts my calendar events, and now I can just scroll through. And since, again, right, it pulls the contact from the database, the content from it in here, we can preview our agenda. And I can just see, well, okay, from 1 to 1:30, right, I'm talking to Mike, Emma, and David, and these are the things we talk about. If I want to see more, right, I can unroll it, and it's much quicker to go through all the meetings in my day and their agendas rather than having to click into every single one of them. I'm really excited for use case number 3, the Notion CRM. Now, slowly and steadily, Notion has been releasing features to make CRMs a lot more powerful. We're still missing email integration for me to recommend it in pretty much any situation, but it's a much more robust option for a lot more companies now. So here's a simple demo setup with companies, right? And of course, our contacts on specific companies. And thanks to feeds we can now show the activities that happen on each contact much better. So let's have a look at Maria Rodriguez. And we can see, right, we have our content tab where we can record any normal information, right, about her. But we can also switch to activities, which is a feed view of, well, these linked entries. And we see we had a follow-up meeting with her on June 15th with contract negotiation, with an email follow-up on June 14th, product demo on June 12th, and so on and so on. The classic way, right, of how you would show usually these activities for a setup like that. And the backend is very simple, right? We have our separated activities database that links to contacts. And then on our contacts, we use the customize layout feature to add this tab here at the top. Right? We could pull in other tabs, or we could show other feeds. Maybe we have overall contracts or sales prospects with them, right? If we sell to the same person several times, we could show that in here, right? If you sell to individuals and they buy several times from you, you could see their order history pop up here as a feed. The world really is your oyster, and it's super useful in this context. I think you see a pattern by now. Areas where the feed view is particularly great. Pretty much any time, right? You either want to highlight something as this big, bold, standalone entry, like with the task of the day, or in situations where you want a continuous list, sort of a chronological order of things with a bit more content. Another great example, of course, a product changelog. We can, of course, show it as a table that generally works, but just compare this setup with our feed now, right? Where we can see, okay, dark mode and theme customization, the API improvements, and so on, right? And we can just go through this in order. Also great in meetings, by the way, right? If you have, on the other hand, a view where you say, okay, here are all my completed tasks, right? And then you scroll through with your direct report or with your manager in a meeting. Really cool way to revisit everything. I really love how flexible Notion's new feed view is. Another great use case, let's say you have a product roadmap where you combine strategic input from leadership with your individual customer feedback to make, well, the right product decision. And thanks to the new feed view, it's now easier than ever to display all that customer feedback when you look at a certain product feature. And if you want to learn how to build a product roadmap in Notion, well, I've got you covered. Here's a full tutorial going from an empty page to a complete workspace setup. Just click here and I will see you in a few seconds.